Ubuntu. It's an African term meaning I am because we are. Ubuntu is the deepest acknowledgement that I am here, that I only exist because of humanity, because of all of you and all that came before you. My thoughts, my actions, my essence are the result of hundreds of thousands of years of thought and action and energy. I'm the experiences and emotions of centuries of hardworking farmers in New York and Czechoslovakia, most of whom I never personally met. I'm the experiences and emotions of a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old that I spend time with each day. I'm a combination of the thousands of teachers and mentors that touched the lives of every teacher and mentor of mine. I'm the energy of every smile sent in my direction and every tear that graced the cheeks of those who have cried on my shoulder. I am years of abuse and trauma passed down generation to generation. I am a survivor because we all are. Nelson Mandela described Ubuntu like this: I need you in order to be me, and you need me in order to be you. Ubuntu is the belief that humanity is a quality we owe each other. It seems pretty Buddhist, this idea of deep connection with others. Perhaps that's why I find myself drawn to it. My own spiritual journey moved from childhood and young adult Catholicism to non-denominational Christianity to practicing Nichiren Buddhism, where I found God. And by God, I mean peace and connection and unconditional love. My only other qualification to share on Ubuntu today is my fascination with psychology, sociology, and anthropology. I may have even chosen one of these fascinating fields of study in college had I not been told repeatedly as a child, Caroline, you can be whatever you want when you grow up, as long as it's an engineer. This Ubuntu-type philosophy is not exclusive to Africa or Asia. There is a traditional Mayan greeting some of you may have heard, in Lakesh. It means, I am another you, or you are my other me. This poem by Luis Valdez, regarded as the father of Chicano theater, describes this feeling of shared humanity. En Lakesh, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago daño a mí mismo, I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo y respeto yo, I love and respect myself. So in Lakesh, Ubuntu, a deep respect for all of humanity, for I exist only through them. It's so nice in theory, isn't it? This ideal of compassion and respect towards all. You'd think if anyone, us UUs, would have a leg up on Ubuntu, right? After all, our first two UU principles say that each and every person is important, and they instruct us to be kind in all we do. But we all know it's hard to be nice to everyone, especially with the advent of Facebook. There are no secrets anymore, folks. We know too much now. Things we didn't want to know. And I don't mean what you ate for breakfast. The things that have long been frowned upon to discuss in the workplace, at the dinner table, and perhaps even in mixed company, like religion and politics, are openly discussed and debated, along with other issues that can be equally personal and polarizing, like marriage equality, immigration reform, Black Lives Matter, the refugee crisis. Social media is a breeding ground for activism and for counter-activism. I do believe that for the most part this is a good thing, this exposure to all types of beliefs. But what has been most eye-opening to me is this. Anger and hate are not qualities that are limited to a particular political party. If we hate racism, how do we feel about racists? If we hate homophobia, how do we feel about the bigot? When it comes down to standing up for what we believe in, I know plenty of you who will dish out as much vitriol as anyone else. Yes, Facebook has taught me that hate comes packaged in all shapes and sizes, disguised as conservatives and liberals, Christians and atheists, American and not. The fact is we're all guilty. But why is this? Why is kindness or even acceptance so very difficult? I did a little research on cultures where human kindness is more prevalent, and I discovered some fascinating things. The most peaceful societies are tucked into countries all over the world, from Malaysia to Africa, Egypt to Venezuela, Thailand to Mexico. The following are excerpts from the website peacefulsocieties.org. Most of these nonviolent cultures have a wide range of strategies for promoting interpersonal harmony, building mutual respect, and fostering tolerance for individual differences. Although there are many differences in these cultures, they are largely egalitarian, meaning all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. And lastly, they value cooperation over competition. At the other end of the spectrum are the most violent cultures. The following describes a geographical study by scientist John DeMeo, first published in the 1980s, on the ancient historical origins of human violence and warfare. Based on global archaeological and anthropological evidence, the study presents substantial proof that our ancient ancestors were non-violent and far more social and loving than most humans today. The study points to a dramatic climate change in the Old World in 4000 BC, the drying up of the vast area of the Sahara and Asian deserts, which had formerly been lush and green. This resulted in famine, starvation, forced migration, the abandonment of children when their parents died, and the need to compete for the few remaining resources. The trauma this caused did irreparable damage to the mental health of surviving generation after generation, pushing the earliest humans into violent social patterns, transforming their original peaceful and egalitarian social behavior into warlike and authoritarian, a trauma from which we have not yet recovered in 6,000 years. These early humans were literally cast from the Garden of Eden. This study is published in the book titled Saharasia, The 4000 BC Origins of Child Abuse, Sex Repression, Warfare, and Social Violence in the Deserts of the Old World. Now, I'd be remiss if I did not point out that this region of the world overlaps with Middle Eastern countries which have become all too familiar, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Egypt, Pakistan, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, just to name a few. I might also point out that this part of the world is not only considered the cradle of civilization, but the birthplace of almost all organized religion. So sadly, it makes sense that these types of horrific conditions so many years ago had such a deep impact on humans. The shift from living in a state of love to living in a state of fear is almost palpable. But what about us? What's our excuse for this illusion of separateness in our wealthy, natural resource-laden, advanced American society? Could it be a touch of society-wide narcissism? Based on my research and my personal experience, I believe the single most destructive force in our society is shame. Now, apparently, just hearing the word shame makes us feel shame. So bear with me for just a few minutes and take some small comfort in the fact that if you are uncomfortable, you are completely normal. According to psychologists, the only people who don't experience shame are sociopaths. So clearly, it's a very powerful word and a very destructive force in our society. But first, a quick differentiation. Shame should not be confused with guilt. Guilt is, I did something wrong. Shame is, I am something wrong. Shame is the little voice in our head saying, you aren't good enough. There's something wrong with you. You aren't pretty enough or fit enough or smart enough or hardworking enough. You just don't measure up. Guilt can actually bring about positive changes in our life, a desire to improve, but not shame. According to Brené Brown, a leading researcher, shame leads to eating disorders, drug and alcohol addiction, abusive behavior, bullying, and suicide. I wonder then, could shame also lead to bigotry, racism, xenophobia? Shame creates a deep-seated feeling of contempt inwardly towards ourselves and externally towards humanity. Shame forces some of us to wear a mask of perfection, and when we and others don't live up to our perfect expectations, we judge them and cast them aside. Shame brings about deep feelings of separation, of being disconnected from society. It is the anti-Ubuntu. So where does this shame come from? At an individual level, shame oftentimes stems from our childhood. For some of us, highly traumatic events, such as severe abuse and neglect, taught us at a visceral level, I am worthless. Other types of trauma can also be blamed. Psychological studies point to transgenerational trauma, or trauma that is transferred from trauma survivors to generation after generation via complex post-traumatic stress disorder mechanisms. Not only does this explain the deep and lasting trauma in Saharasia, but it has been demonstrated more recently with generation after generation of Holocaust survivors. But trauma isn't the only source of shame. It comes from more innocuous sources too. After all, it's a popular parenting tool. How many times were you asked as a child, "What is wrong with you?" And subsequently play that lingering negative mantra like a broken record in your mind as an adult. I would even go out on a limb and point out that our national level of shame, from how this country came to be to how we continue to treat minorities today, we all carry shame. Another source of shame and separateness, believe it or not, is competition. From a young age, we are subjected to competition amongst siblings, in public schools, sporting events, spelling bees, even just raising your hand in class and hoping to get called upon to prove your knowledge, only to be overlooked time and time again. How many of you remember what it felt like to get picked last? Competition is a systematic comparing of ourselves to others, and at the deepest level of our being, it is what separates us from our fellow man. The idea that competition is good for us has actually been disproven in multiple studies. It reduces creativity. It can reduce our level of performance. Competition places our focus solely on winning and not necessarily on producing our highest quality or our best self. So how do we overcome shame? Frankly, we could probably all use some good psychotherapy. But here are some suggestions that you can try at home. I want to first add as a preface to these suggestions that they almost all involve the use of mantras or positive affirmations. I'm a huge believer in using intention to create what we want in life. It has been proven that through regular practice, you can consciously train your subconscious mind to not only believe what you want, but to start attracting the types of things you want into your life. So, first, forgive yourself. You know, it's funny, we hear a lot about how healthy forgiveness is, but rarely is that forgiveness directed back at us. I think Maya Angelou put it beautifully and simply when she said, "I did the best I knew at the time. When I knew better, I did better." I did the best I knew at the time. When I knew better, I did better. This was my mantra for years until I finally believed it. Forgive yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. I taught this mantra to my kids. I am perfect just the way I am. I can make mistakes. They help me learn and grow. Another suggestion, practice empathy. Practice it with yourself first, then practice it with others. If it doesn't come naturally, it's okay to pretend or pre-intend. Just put the intention out there. Try to remember we're all human. We all make mistakes. We're all doing the best we can. A big selling point for practicing empathy and kindness is that research shows that people who do so are actually happier. Being kind makes us happier. More good news. Neurologists claim that every time you resist acting on your anger, you're actually rewiring your brain to be calmer and more loving. So the next time someone cuts you off on the highway, instead of saying, sugar, try saying this mantra instead. Empathy, empathy, empathy. If you are a parent or grandparent, aunt, uncle, please recognize the serious repercussions of shaming tactics on children. Overall, humanity is becoming more gentle and kind, but there seems to be this pervasive notion that our parents knew what the heck they were doing. Why then are we the most drug-addicted, abusive, anxious, and depressed generation in history? One of the best parenting resources I have found is called Love and Logic out of Boulder, Colorado. I'll share with you just one of their gems. Next time you are dragged into an argument with a loved one, a child, your partner, say this: I love you too much to argue with you. You can even repeat it. I love you too much to argue with you. I promise you, it will leave them stunned, and the argument will more than likely vaporize. Think of the story that Dylan shared earlier about a village in Africa surrounding the offending party in a circle and reminding them of all the reasons why they are loved. It's true. When we're likely to slip up, just like when we were kids, we are crying for attention. We all need to be seen and loved. I might also suggest focusing more time on cooperative activities with your children and grandchildren instead of purely competitive. Activities like canoeing, dancing, hiking, cycling, yoga, all offer opportunities towards learning how to be with each other, to be present with each other, rather than trying to be better than each other. So let me ask you this. Do we want peace, or do we want to be right? It's time to let go of this idea that we each have it all figured out and open our minds to the humanity we share with every other human on this planet, regardless of their religious affiliation, regardless of their level of anxiety or anger, fear, and regardless of their political beliefs. Our shared humanity truly connects us all. I'll summarize by sharing a true story out of the small town of Benton, Michigan, about an innocent black man, Jamil McGee, who was successfully framed for dealing drugs by a white cop, Andrew Collins, who claimed, "I just started that day wanting another drug arrest." Jamil served 4 years for a crime he didn't commit. And Collins, who it turns out had falsified more than one police report, ended up serving 1.5 years himself. When both men returned to the small town of Benton, Jamil, who had lost everything, claims he wanted to hurt Collins. After some time passed, the two men ended up at the same faith-based employment agency in Benton, and not long after found themselves working in the same cafe, side by side. With nowhere to hide, Collins finally told Jamil, "I have no explanation. All I can do is say I'm sorry." Jamil claims that this was all he needed to hear. He forgave Collins, and the two are now very close friends, even telling each other, "I love you." But Jamil insists he didn't forgive Collins for his friend nor for himself. He claims he forgave him for us, for all of us. This is Ubuntu. Mother Teresa, or as of this morning, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, once said, "The problem with the world is that we draw the circle of our family too small." Maybe it's time we widen our circle. In Lakesh. Thank you.